Christmas night, blizzard. A woman in a wheelchair gets punched off her own porch by her brother. She hits the frozen ground hard. Her dog screams. 20 yards away, hidden in the dark behind a dead pickup truck, a man watches in silence. His hands don't shake. His breathing doesn't change. He hasn't spoken to another human being in 4 months. He didn't come here to get involved. He came here to disappear. But the old dog is bleeding in the snow, and the woman isn't getting up, and something inside Logan Mercer, something he thought died in a cave in Kandahar, just clicked back on. Before we go further, if you're new here, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Stories like this one drop every week, and you do not want to miss what's coming. Drop your city or country in the comments right now. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Now, let's go back to Red Hollow. The Greyhound died 11 miles outside of town. Not dramatically, not with a bang or a fireball. It just stopped. The engine coughed twice, the heat cut out, and the driver said something into his radio that nobody in the back could hear. Then he turned around with that particular face, the one people make when they're about to deliver bad news and are already pre-apologizing for it. Folks, we've got a mechanical situation. Logan Mercer didn't look up from the window. He'd been watching the mountains for the last 2 hours anyway, the way the snowfall moved differently between the tree lines, the way certain ridge lines would have made good sniper positions, the way the road curved in a way that would have concerned him if he'd been running convoy. Old habits. Useless ones now. He was the last passenger still seated when everyone else filed off to stand in the cold and argue about cell signal. He had no one to call, nowhere urgent to be. His duffel was in the overhead. One change of clothes, a worn paperback he hadn't opened in 3 states, and a VA prescription bottle he'd been deliberately not taking for 6 weeks. His dog, Duke, lifted his blocky head from the seat beside him. Duke was a Belgian Malinois, retired military working dog, with a scar along his left flank and an ear that didn't sit quite right anymore. They'd been reassigned to each other at the same time they'd both been deemed unfit for further deployment. Neither of them had adjusted particularly well to civilian life. "Yeah," Logan said quietly. "I know." He grabbed the duffel. They got off the bus. Marit. The driver said a tow and a replacement bus would arrive within 2 hours. It was currently 19 degrees and dropping. Most passengers started walking toward the glow of what appeared to be a gas station about a half-mile back. Logan started walking the other direction, toward the lights of what the road sign said was Red Hollow, population 1,140. He didn't know why. He just didn't want to be where everyone else was going. Duke walked close to his left leg, no leash, scanning the dark the way he always did. They'd done 12 deployments together. The dog trusted Logan's judgment about as much as Logan didn't trust his own. The blizzard was picking up, real snow, the kind that didn't drift but fell straight down, heavy, committed, the kind that buried cars by morning. The road through Red Hollow's main strip was empty. A diner with its lights still on. A hardware store. A church with a nativity scene half buried in white. Christmas Eve, and the whole town felt like it had pulled its curtains and decided to wait out the dark. Logan had a vague plan: find somewhere warm, wait for the bus situation to resolve, keep moving north. He had no specific destination in the north. He just knew he couldn't stay in Phoenix anymore. Not after what happened with his sister's visit. Not after the night he sat in his truck in his own driveway for 3 hours because he couldn't make himself go inside. He was 41 years old. He had a Bronze Star and a chest full of other hardware he kept in a shoebox. He had 17 years of service and a medical discharge and a therapist he'd ghosted after their 3rd session. He had Duke. That was the complete inventory. He was passing the last cross street before the road curved out of town when he heard it. Not loud. The wind was eating most of the sound, but he caught it. A voice, male, high-pitched with anger. Then a sound he'd heard enough times to know exactly what it was. The solid, ugly thud of a fist connecting with something. Then a woman's cry that cut off too fast. Logan stopped walking. Duke stopped with him, ears forward, nose working. Leave it alone. The thought was clear and immediate. You don't know these people. You don't know this town. You don't need more of other people's problems on top of your own. He stood there in the snowfall, not moving, for almost 4 seconds. Then he cut left between two houses, moving through the dark toward the sound without making a decision he could name. The farmhouse sat back from the road maybe 40 yards, a gravel drive splitting a field that was all snow and shadow. The porch light was on. Two vehicles in the drive. A newer pickup, engine running, and an older Subaru with a busted taillight. He saw the wheelchair first. It was on the porch, tilted against the railing, one wheel still spinning slowly. He saw the woman on the ground. She'd hit the porch decking on her side and was trying to get her arms under her, breath coming in white bursts, hair across her face and snow in it already. Late 30s, maybe 40. She hadn't had time to grab a coat. He saw the man standing over her, big guy, mid-40s, wearing a work jacket with a logo on it, face red with cold or anger or both. He had papers in one hand, folded documents, and he was holding them down toward her like they were a weapon. "You're going to sign it, Elena, tonight. I'm not driving back out here again in this weather." "Get off my property, Derek." Her voice was remarkably steady for someone lying on a frozen porch. She had one arm under her and was pushing herself up. "I told you, I'm not signing anything without a lawyer." "You don't have a lawyer. You don't have anything. That's the whole point." Then the German shepherd appeared from inside, old, white around the muzzle, moving stiffly, and threw himself between the man and the woman on the ground. The dog wasn't barking. It was just standing there, hackles up, teeth showing, putting its body between them with the quiet certainty of an animal that had made its decision. The man's face changed. He kicked the dog. Not a warning kick, a real one, with force, and the old dog went sideways off the porch into the snow below, with a sound that landed somewhere in Logan's chest like a round. Logan was already moving. He didn't run. He didn't announce himself. He came around the side of the truck in the driveway and stopped at the base of the porch steps, 8 feet from Derek maybe, and just stood there. Duke sat at his heel, silent as smoke. Derek spun around. For a moment, nobody said anything. The blizzard filled the silence with its own white noise. Derek looked Logan up and down. Logan was 6'2", wearing a canvas jacket over a thermal, a 3-week beard, a duffel on one shoulder, and an expression that conveyed absolutely nothing, which was somehow worse than menace. "Who the hell are you?" "Bus broke down," Logan said. Derek stared at him. "What?" "My bus broke down. About a mile out." Logan nodded toward the road. "I'm just passing through, looking for somewhere to wait out the storm." He paused. "Heard some noise." "This is a private family situation." Derek straightened up, readjusting the papers in his hand. "Nothing to do with you. Keep walking." "I'll keep walking." Logan didn't move. His eyes went past Derek to where Elena had gotten herself to a sitting position against the railing, hand pressed to the side of her jaw. "Soon as I know she's all right." "She's fine." "I'd like to hear that from her." The silence stretched. Derek's jaw tightened. He was the kind of man used to being the largest person in the room, used to that being enough. Logan clocked the tells, the slight widening of the stance, the papers crumpling in his fist, the quick calculation happening behind his eyes. "Elena." Derek didn't look at her. "Tell this guy you're fine so he can keep walking." Elena looked at Logan from the porch floor. Her eyes were dark, sharp, and she was clearly running her own assessment of the stranger at the bottom of her steps. Whatever she saw, something in her posture shifted. "I'm not fine," she said clearly. "And this is my property. I'd like you to leave, Derek." "We're not done. My property." Her voice dropped to something quieter and infinitely harder. "Get off it." Derek left. Not cleanly. There was a lot of noise about lawyers and deadlines and how she'd regret this, and how their parents would have been ashamed. That last one delivered with the practiced aim of someone who knew exactly where it landed. But he got in the pickup and he left, tires spitting gravel under the snow, headlights swinging across the dark field as he reversed out. Logan watched the taillights disappear. He didn't fully relax. He gave it 45 seconds, tracking the engine sound until it faded. Then he went to check on the dog in the snow. Rusty had gotten himself upright by the time Logan reached him. The old shepherd was trembling, shock or cold or pain, probably all three. But he was standing. Logan ran his hands along the dog's ribs slowly, methodically. Rusty let him, which told Logan two things. The dog had been handled by someone patient before, and the dog was hurting enough to accept help from a stranger. "Easy," Logan said softly. "Easy, old man. Let me look." Duke sat 3 feet away, watching Rusty with what Logan had learned to read as professional assessment. "Ribs might be bruised," Logan said, mostly to himself. "Nothing feels broken." He wasn't a vet. He'd worked with military dogs long enough to know what a serious injury felt like under his hands, and this wasn't that. But it wasn't nothing either. He looked up. Elena was watching from the porch. She'd gotten herself back into the wheelchair. He hadn't heard her do it, which meant she'd been managing that particular task long enough to make it quiet. She had a hand pressed to her jaw, and even in the porch light he could see the swelling starting. "Can he walk?" she asked. "Yeah, slowly." Logan stood. "You need ice for that." "I know what I need." Not hostile, just matter of fact. She turned the chair toward the door, then stopped. "You said your bus broke down." "Yeah." "Are you actually looking for somewhere to wait, or was that just something you said?" Logan considered the question seriously. "Both, I think." She looked at him for a long moment. The snow was coming down harder now, and his jacket wasn't made for this kind of sustained cold. "I have a couch," she said, "and coffee. Rusty likes you, which is more than he does for most people." She pushed the door open. "Don't make me regret this." He carried Rusty up the porch steps. The old dog didn't fight it. The farmhouse was warm in the way that old houses got warm. Not efficient, not even, but present. There was a wood stove in the living room doing serious work. Christmas lights around a small tree in the corner, photographs on every wall. The kitchen smelled like something that had been cooking earlier, and the ghost of pine from a wreath over the sink. Elena put a bag of frozen peas against her jaw and made coffee without being asked. Logan settled Rusty onto what was clearly the dog's usual spot, a worn blanket beside the wood stove, and Duke lay down near the door, watching everything and nothing. Logan sat at the kitchen table without taking off his jacket. "Elena Brooks," she said, setting a mug in front of him. "Logan Mercer." She sat across from him, peas held to her face, studying him with a directness that he respected. Most people looked away from him eventually. She didn't. "You move like someone who's been in the military," she said. "Navy, retired." "How retired?" "1.5 years." She nodded slowly. "My husband was Army, long time ago." She said it the way people said things that ended conversations, so he didn't pull on the thread. They drank coffee. Outside, the blizzard pushed against the windows. "Your brother," Logan said. "How often does he come out here?" "More lately." She lowered the frozen peas and examined them as if they'd given her useful information. "Since the holidays started. Since he found out the ranch is worth more than it was when our parents left it to me. He wants to sell it. He wants his half of what it's worth. Problem is, they left it entirely to me." She set the peas on the table. "Long story. Short version is I was the one here. I was the one who stayed. He left for Tucson 20 years ago and decided to come back once there was something to take. Those papers he had. Some kind of partnership claim. His lawyer wrote it. My lawyer, when I can reach her, says it's mostly garbage. But if he can pressure me into signing before she does anything about it..." She trailed off. "You file anything? Protection order?" "In a county with 4 deputies, 2 of whom went to high school with Derek?" She looked at him steadily. "I filed one 6 weeks ago. It's pending." Logan wrapped his hands around the coffee mug. The ceramic was warm and solid. He thought about the way Derek had kicked Rusty. Not in the heat of the moment, not a reflex, but deliberate, calculated. The kind of kick you aimed. "He'll come back," Logan said. "I know." "Tonight, possibly." She looked at him. "I know that too." Silence. The wood stove ticked. Duke shifted position near the door. "Is there anyone you can call?" Logan asked. "Family, friend, anyone who could come out here tonight?" Elena Brooks smiled, and it was the saddest expression he'd seen on someone's face in a long time. Not dramatic, not performing, just honest. "You're looking at my current situation," she said. He didn't leave. He told himself it was the blizzard. It was, partly. But he'd slept in worse conditions than a porch in a snowstorm, and he knew it. And she probably knew it too. Neither of them brought it up. He moved around the perimeter of the house once the coffee was done. Quietly, not announcing it, just needing to know what he was dealing with. Back door off the kitchen, unlocked. Side window in the spare room with a latch that didn't catch properly. Front porch had good sight lines to the road but no cover to speak of. The driveway was visible from the living room window on the left side. It wasn't a defensive position, it was a home. He came back inside and sat back down. "You checked the house," Elena said from the living room, not looking up from where she was scratching Rusty's ear. "Yeah. And?" "Side window in the spare room doesn't latch right." She was quiet for a moment. "Marcus kept saying he was going to fix that." "Marcus?" She didn't answer right away. "My husband." Logan said nothing. He went and made sure the window was secured with what he found in the kitchen junk drawer, a strip of wood cut to fit the track. Not perfect. Better than nothing. It was past midnight when Elena showed him the couch. She left him a blanket that smelled like cedar and a pillow that was slightly flat and didn't apologize for either. Duke had already claimed the floor space beside the couch with the authority of a dog who'd slept in considerably worse places. "Thank you," she said from the hallway. "For Rusty and for—" She stopped. "You didn't have to stop." "No," he agreed. "I didn't." She looked at him for a moment in the low light, the Christmas lights from the tree casting everything in soft red and green. "What were you running from?" she asked quietly. "Before the bus broke down." It was the most direct question anyone had asked him in a year. He thought about giving her the military answer, the non-answer, the deflection, but something about the way she asked it, without judgment, like she was asking because she already knew the shape of the answer, if not the details, stopped him. "Myself, mostly," he said. She nodded, like that was exactly what she'd expected. "Me too," she said, and she went to bed. Logan lay on the couch in the dark, listening to the house, the wood stove, the wind, the occasional sound of Rusty shifting on his blanket across the room, Duke breathing steadily on the floor. He wasn't asleep. He didn't sleep the way normal people slept, hadn't in years. He dozed in intervals, brain staying at half power, cataloging sounds, updating threat assessments. It wasn't insomnia exactly. It was a recalibration that the VA called hypervigilance and that Logan called Tuesday. At 2:14 a.m., headlights swept across the living room ceiling. He was upright before the light finished moving. Feet on the floor, jacket still on, completely alert in the space between one heartbeat and the next. The headlights stopped at the end of the driveway. Sat there for 60 seconds. Then went dark. Logan moved to the window without turning on any lights, staying to the side of the glass, looking out into the snowfield. Shapes in the dark. Hard to tell at this distance in this weather. Duke was at his side, nose against the cold glass, absolutely rigid. Logan's pulse was calm and even. He'd felt this before. The held breath before contact. The moment where everything was still potential. His hand went to where a sidearm would have been, found nothing, came away. He went to the kitchen and called out softly, "Elena." No answer. Deeper in the house, a door opened. "I heard," she said from the hallway. Her voice was awake. She'd been listening too. Logan turned to look at her and saw what she was holding. A shotgun. Pump-action Mossberg, old but maintained, held the way someone held something they'd been taught to hold a long time ago. He should have been surprised. "How many?" she asked. He looked back at the window. Two shapes moving through the snowfield, coming in from the north side of the property. No flashlights. Slow, deliberate. "At least two," Logan said. "More, maybe. Coming around back?" He looked at her. She looked at him. The Christmas lights were still on in the living room, casting everything in that soft, ridiculous glow. "Side window?" she said quietly. "You fixed it." "Bought us 30 seconds, he said. "Maybe." Outside, the snow was still falling, and then the barn light, the one on the far side of the property, the one that Elena had mentioned wasn't on a timer, blinked off. Someone had cut the power. The barn light going dark was not an accident. Logan knew the difference between a bulb burning out and a circuit being cut. A bulb went out without drama. This one died clean, all at once. The way power died when someone who knew what they were doing pulled the right wire, which meant whoever was out there in the snow had been here before, had walked this property, had known where the junction box was. That changed the math considerably. "Kill the Christmas lights," he said. Elena reached behind the tree, and pulled the plug without hesitation. The living room went dark. Only the wood stove remained, its small orange glow seeping through the grate, painting the floor in dim amber. Logan moved to the far side of the front window again, staying back from the glass, using the curtain's edge. His eyes were already adjusted to the dark. He'd been careful about that, keeping away from the kitchen light when he'd come back from checking the window. Old habit. One of the useful ones. The two shapes he'd seen moving through the north field had gone still. That bothered him more than movement would have. Movement told you where someone was. Stillness told you they were waiting for something. "Back door," he said quietly. "Is there a chain on it?" "Dead bolt." "Throw it." He heard her move. The soft rubber of the wheelchair on the kitchen linoleum, quick and practiced, no wasted motion. He was still learning what she could and couldn't do, and he kept being wrong about it in ways that mattered. Duke hadn't moved from his position beside Logan. The dog's body was a wire pulled tight, every muscle coiled, tracking something with his nose that Logan couldn't access. Logan put a hand on Duke's back, not to restrain him, just to stay connected. "Two coming from the north," Logan said, low. "They cut your barn power. That's premeditated. These aren't just your brother's drinking buddies working up nerve. Derek doesn't have drinking buddies who know where junction boxes are." "No," Logan agreed. "He doesn't." That sat between them for a moment. "He hired somebody," Elena said. It wasn't a question. "Or borrowed somebody." The deadbolt on the back door clicked into place. Elena came back to the kitchen doorway. In the dark, with the shotgun across her lap and her jaw still swollen on one side, she looked like someone the world had been trying to break for a long time without quite managing it. "What do we do?" she asked. Logan thought for exactly 2 seconds, which was longer than he usually took. He was running the space in his head. Room dimensions, entry points, angles of cover. The front door opened inward, which was good. The porch gave approach angles from 3 sides, which was bad. The kitchen had the back door and one window over the sink. The hallway was a fatal funnel if anyone got inside. Long, narrow, nowhere to go. "You know how to work that Mossberg?" "My husband taught me." A beat. "Yes." "If anyone comes through that back door after I've opened it, you don't ask questions." He looked at her. "Can you do that?" Her jaw tightened on the unbruised side. "You're going outside." "I'd rather deal with this in the yard than in a hallway with you behind me." "There are at least 2 of them." "I know." He moved toward the front door. "Duke!" The dog rose silently and came to his side. "Logan!" Her voice stopped him at the door. Not scared. Something more complicated than scared. "You don't owe me this." He thought about the bus. He thought about the empty seat and the empty bottle of pills he'd been not taking, and the particular emptiness of knowing you're heading north for no reason except that South had stopped working. "I know," he said, and opened the door. The cold hit him like a wall. 19 degrees had dropped to probably 15, and the wind had a blade in it that cut straight through the canvas jacket. He registered it and filed it away. Not a threat, just a condition. He came off the porch without using the steps, dropping into the snow on the left side, staying low against the porch rail where the shadow was deepest. Duke dropped with him, chest to ground, belly in the snow, absolutely silent. The dog had done this before. They both had. Logan gave himself 20 seconds to let his eyes fully settle into the dark. The snowfield was pale and featureless, except for the dark mass of the barn 60 yards out and the tree line beyond it. The 2 shapes he'd seen from the window were somewhere between the house and the barn, and they were good enough to not be visible anymore, which meant they'd gone to ground in the shallow drainage ditch that ran along the north side of the property. He'd noted that ditch when he'd walked the perimeter. He'd noted it as a problem. He was right. He moved left, staying parallel to the house, using the porch shadow as cover until he cleared the corner. Then he went low and moved fast across the open space toward the woodpile. 20 feet, in the snow, not running. The careful, quick gait of someone who had learned that running in the dark got you killed because running made noise, and noise made you a target. He made it to the woodpile and went still. Duke materialized beside him 5 seconds later. Logan hadn't seen him move. He never did. From this angle, he could see the ditch line. He watched for a full minute, long enough that most people would have stopped watching and decided they were wrong. He wasn't wrong. There, a head rising briefly above the ditch's edge to look at the house, then down again. Then another head, 10 feet further east, same motion, 2 confirmed, possibly more he couldn't see. He was unarmed. He had a K-bar on his belt. Habit always had one, always would. And his hands and Duke and 17 years of doing this in places where the stakes were considerably higher. None of which changed the fact that if either of those men had a firearm and solid training, Logan's tactical situation was what his old team sergeant would have called suboptimal. But they hadn't moved in 5 minutes. They were waiting for something, a signal, a third person, a specific time, which meant he had a window. He picked up a chunk of split firewood from the pile, judged the weight, and threw it hard to the right, far right, toward the road, away from his position and away from the house. It landed in the snow 30 yards out with a distinct thump. Both heads in the ditch snapped toward the sound. Logan moved. He came in from their left flank, staying low, closing the 20 yards to the ditch in the time it took them to decide the sound wasn't a threat. He went into the ditch on the near end, dropping in hard, knees bent, absorbing it, and came up behind the first man before the man had time to process the sound of boots in snow. It was close and fast and not clean. The first man was bigger than he'd looked from a distance, and he turned with decent reflexes, enough to partially deflect what Logan was doing. Logan took a forearm to the side of his head that rang his ears and still put the man face down in 8 inches of snow with one arm locked behind him in a way that suggested moving would be a poor decision. The second man scrambled upright and went for his pocket. Duke hit him from the side. Not a bite. Duke was trained better than that, unless Logan said different. A body check. A 110-pound working dog moving at full speed hitting a man's center of mass. The second man went down sideways, and the thing in his pocket, a compact, Logan saw it now, a compact semi-automatic, went into the snow and disappeared. Logan had the first man's face in the snow and his arm at an angle that made further resistance a question of how much pain he was willing to absorb. "Stop," Logan said. Quiet, conversational. "Tell your friend to stop." "Marcus," the first man started, and the second man had frozen anyway under Duke's focused attention, the dog standing over him with his muzzle 6 inches from the man's throat. Logan applied a little more pressure to the arm. The man made a noise. "Who sent you?" "Nothing." Then, "I want a lawyer." "You're not under arrest." Logan leaned in slightly. "Who sent you?" "We were just supposed to scare her." "Scare her?" "Make her want to sign, that's all. Nobody was supposed to get hurt." Logan stayed very still for a moment. Professional low-level intimidation work. Someone had hired out. Not high-end, not tactical, just enough to shake a woman alone on a ranch on Christmas Eve. Cheap. Disposable. "Where's the third one?" Logan asked. The man's breathing changed, just slightly. Logan had his answer. He looked up toward the house in time to see the side window light, the spare room window, glow briefly with a flashlight beam moving inside. He left the 2 men in the ditch. Not cleanly restrained, he didn't have anything to restrain them with, but with a clear understanding of what Duke would do if they followed. Duke could communicate that particular message without Logan's help. He went back across the yard in a dead run, not caring about noise now. The back door was still locked. He went around to the front and in through the porch, not announcing himself, calling Elena's name at the threshold so she knew it was him coming through. "Elena!" "Spare room," she called back. Her voice was tight. "Someone came through the window. I heard it." The window, the one he'd fixed with a strip of wood. He moved down the hall and hit the spare room door with his shoulder, not hard. It wasn't locked. and came in low out of habit. The room was empty. Window open, curtain blowing inward. Snow on the sill and a line of boot tracks across the wood floor, crossing to the door on the far side that opened into the hallway. The tracks went toward the kitchen, and from the kitchen came the sound of a cabinet opening. Logan moved back into the hallway and went toward the kitchen from the living room side, coming around the corner to find a man standing at the kitchen counter with his back to the room, a flashlight between his teeth, going through Elena's counter drawer. Younger than the two outside, late 20s, wiry, wearing a ski mask pushed up on his forehead like he'd decided it was unnecessary. He was looking for something specific. Logan stepped into the kitchen doorway. The man spun and threw the flashlight by reflex, and Logan moved his head 3 inches, and the flashlight hit the doorframe and clattered to the floor. The man lunged for the back door, realized it was deadbolted, and he didn't know which way it turned, wasted half a second on it. Logan put him against the wall. Quick, controlled, face first. "The drawer," Logan said. "What were you looking for?" "Nothing, I was just in the kitchen, specifically that drawer." Logan turned his head toward Elena, who had appeared in the doorway behind him. "What's in that drawer?" She stared at the man against her wall, at the open drawer. Her face shifted from the careful blankness she'd been maintaining into something colder. "The deed," she said slowly. "I kept a copy of the deed in there." The man stopped struggling. Logan felt the shape of this change. Not scare tactics, not just pressure to sign. They'd come for the document itself. Sheriff Dale Purvis arrived 47 minutes after Elena's call. He was a heavy-set man in his late 50s who got out of his cruiser and surveyed the scene. Logan standing on the porch, 2 men zip-tied with luggage straps that Elena Tehran had found in the spare room closet, and a 3rd man sitting against the kitchen wall. With the expression of someone who had been hoping for a quiet Christmas Eve and was now recalibrating his entire night. "Evening," Logan said. Purvis looked at him. "Who are you?" "Logan Mercer. My bus broke down." Purvis looked at the 3 men, looked at Duke, who was sitting at Logan's heel watching the sheriff with professional interest, looked at Elena in the doorway. "Elena, you okay?" "I've been better, Dale." "Your brother do this?" "My brother arranged it. These 3 are somebody else's work." The sheriff's expression shifted in a way that was hard to read. He looked at the man against the kitchen wall for a long moment, and Logan watched him look, and he noticed that the sheriff's reaction to that specific man was slightly too restrained, like he'd worked to make it neutral. "I know him?" Logan asked. Purvis turned. "Sorry?" "The one inside. You recognized him." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "I don't know what you're talking about." Logan didn't push it. He filed it away. The 3 men were transported. Purvis took a report that felt slightly too short and slightly too friendly toward the part where Logan had been the one doing the detaining. He made a comment about Logan's involvement that had the shape of a warning dressed up as a question. "You were just passing through," Purvis said. "That the story?" "That's the fact," Logan said. "Might be smart to keep passing through." "Might be." After Purvis left, Logan stood on the porch for a long time, looking at the dark. The blizzard was thinning. By morning, the roads would be passable. His bus situation would presumably resolve itself, or he could hitch, or he could start walking north with Duke the way he'd originally planned. He'd been in Red Hollow for approximately 5 hours, and had already been in 2 separate altercations and had a quiet standoff with a county sheriff. He had no job here, no reason here, no claim on anything or anyone here. He was a man passing through on his way to the north, which was nowhere, because nowhere was what he'd been aiming for. He went back inside. Elena was in the kitchen, cleaning up the snow tracked across the floor. Rusty was back on his blanket, watching her. Duke went and lay down near the door again. "You should sleep," Logan said. "I should." She kept moving the mop. "You didn't leave." "No." "You were on the porch a long time." "I was thinking." She stopped mopping and looked at him. "About leaving." He didn't answer, which was its own kind of answer. "You can," she said. "I'm not holding you here. Tonight's over. Purvis will file something and Derek will lawyer up and it'll be quiet for a few days at least." She went back to mopping. "You've done more than enough." The sheriff recognized one of the men they took. The mop stopped. "He tried to cover it," Logan continued, but he knew him, which means either he knows about this and he's been quiet about it, or he's about to become a problem. Logan sat down at the table. Either way, it means this is bigger than your brother needing money. Elena set the mop against the wall. She sat down across from him, and in the kitchen light, the single overhead light that buzzed slightly, the kind of light that revealed everything, she looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. Last year, she said carefully, I started getting letters. Not threats, just letters from a land company, Valley Resource Partners, offering to buy the ranch. First offer was low, then it went up, then it went way up. She folded her hands on the table. I didn't think much about it at first. Land goes up in value, offers go up, that's how it works. But then my attorney looked into Valley Resource Partners and there's nothing there. It's a shell. And the shell connects to another shell, and she lost the thread after that. Logan was quiet. Marcus died 2 years ago, she said. Car accident. Icy road, they said. He went off the county road 2 miles from here at 2 in the afternoon on a clear day in November. She held his gaze. There was ice on the road, they said. I never went out there myself. I couldn't. A pause. Not because of the chair, I couldn't. Logan said nothing. He let the silence do its work because she wasn't done. Derek started coming around 3 months after Marcus died. First time in 4 years. She picked up her coffee cup, put it down without drinking. That's when the letters started too, same month. The wood stove ticked. I'm not saying anything, she said. I'm just telling you what happened. I know, Logan said. He sat there for another minute. He was thinking about the third man, the one who'd come through the window looking specifically for the deed. He was thinking about the sheriff's face. He was thinking about a car that went off a road on a clear day. He was thinking that he hadn't planned to stop walking for anything, and that the past 5 hours had handed him something that felt, in the worst possible way, like something that needed to be finished. I need to make a call tomorrow, he said. An old contact. Former military intelligence, works private sector now. He met her eyes. I want to run Valley Resource Partners. Elena looked at him for a long time. Why? She asked. You don't know me. You were on a bus. I know, he said. I'm still going to make the call. She studied him with those dark, steady eyes. You're not just passing through, are you? She said. It wasn't quite a question. Logan thought about the empty seat on the bus, the prescription bottle, the north, and what waited for him there, which was nothing. I don't think I am, he said. Outside, the blizzard finally quit. The silence it left behind was the loudest thing in Red Hollow. The silence the blizzard left behind lasted exactly 4 days. Logan used them. The morning after Christmas, he borrowed Elena's truck, an aging F250 that ran better than it looked, which he appreciated, and drove the 2 miles of county road to the spot she'd described. The place where Marcus Brooks had gone off the edge on a clear November afternoon 2 years ago. He parked on the shoulder and sat for a moment with the engine running and heat coming out of the vents, looking at the road. It was a straightaway. Not a curve, not a blind intersection, not the kind of place where a driver got surprised. The shoulder dropped off into a drainage gulch maybe 12 feet below road level, shallow enough that a careful driver who'd lost control might have been able to ride it out. The guardrail that should have been there, but he could see the post holes, old ones, filled with frost, had been gone long enough that weeds had grown back around them. He got out and walked the area for 20 minutes without knowing exactly what he was looking for. There was nothing to find after 2 years and 2 Colorado winters. He was mostly calibrating, learning the geography, putting himself in the shape of what had happened. He stood at the edge and looked down at the gulch, and then back at the road, and the road was straight. And the day in November when Marcus died had been clear, and Marcus Brooks had been 38 years old and had driven this road 4 times a week for 11 years. Logan got back in the truck and drove to town. His contact's name was Reyes. Gabriela Reyes, formerly DIA, currently running a boutique investigative firm out of Denver that technically did corporate due diligence and technically did a lot of other things that didn't have clean names. Logan had her number memorized because he'd never trusted phones with numbers that mattered. He called from the diner on Main Street, sitting in a corner booth with coffee he didn't need, and Duke under the table, the lunch crowd thin and incurious on the day after Christmas. She picked up on the second ring. "I heard you retired," she said instead of hello. "I heard the same thing. Where are you?" "Red Hollow, Colorado." A pause. "Never heard of it." "That's the point of it. I need you to run something for me. Shell company, probably multi-layered, Valley Resource Partners. Colorado registered, I think, but the incorporation could be anywhere." He heard her keyboard. Reyes was the kind of person who was always already at her desk. "What's the context?" "Land acquisition, mountain property, aggressive buying campaign, fake corporate structure, possible connection to a homicide made to look like an accident." He drank the coffee. "And I need you to check a local shop. Sheriff Dale Purvis, Red Hollow, Garfield County. Employment history, financials if you can get adjacent to them. Any known associates outside the county." "Logan," her voice dropped. "What are you into out there?" "I don't know yet. That's why I'm calling you." Another pause. "This a paying job?" "It's a favor. I've done a lot of favors for you." "I know." She sighed, a specific sigh he recognized as the one that meant she was already running the search. "Give me 48 hours. Don't do anything dramatic in the meantime." "Sure," he said, which both of them understood wasn't a promise. The 48 hours were not wasted. Logan drove the ranch perimeter twice in the truck and once on foot. He inventoried the outbuildings, barn, equipment shed, a small structure near the back fence line that Elena called the summer kitchen, unused since her parents died. He noted every approach vector, every dead ground where someone could stage without being seen from the house, every natural choke point in the terrain. Then he went to the hardware store in town and spent $230 that he charged to his own card without mentioning it to Elena. She noticed anyway when he came back with a cardboard box. "What's in there?" "Trail cameras, 4 of them." He set the box on the kitchen table. "Motion activated, cellular upload. I want eyes on the driveway, the north field, the back fence line, and the equipment shed." She looked at the box, then at him. "Those are expensive." "Yep." "You can't." "I already did." He started opening the first package. "I'm also going to run wire across the drainage ditch on the north side. Not to hurt anyone. Just noise. Cans, whatever you have. Early warning." "Logan." He looked up. "I can't pay you back for any of this," she said. It came out flat and factual. No performance in it. "I know." "Then why?" He held her gaze for a moment. "Because those men last night weren't amateurs who got talked into something stupid by a desperate brother. They knew where your junction box was. They knew which drawer the deed copy was in. And they came on Christmas Eve because they knew you'd be alone." He went back to the packaging. "Someone has been watching this property, possibly for a long time. And the person who's supposed to protect this county knew one of the men they arrested last night and pretended he didn't." The kitchen was quiet. "So I'm putting up cameras," he said. Elena was still for another moment. Then she moved to the table and picked up one of the camera packages. "Show me how they work," she said. "If something happens when you're not here, I need to know how to check them." He showed her. It took most of the afternoon. Beck. He slept in the spare room that night, after fixing the window properly with hardware from the store. It was a small room with a single bed and a quilt that smelled like it had been in a cedar chest, and he lay on top of the covers fully dressed and stared at the ceiling and thought about the road where Marcus Brooks had died. Straight away. Clear day. Man who'd driven it 4 times a week for 11 years. He thought about the timing, the land company letters starting 3 months after Marcus died, Derek appearing in the same window, the escalating offer prices, someone who wanted this specific property badly enough to keep raising their number. Why this property? That was the question he didn't have an answer to yet. The ranch was good land, 300 and some acres in a mountain valley, water rights on a creek that ran year-round, timber on the back quarter. Worth money, certainly. Worth enough to manufacture a cover story about a car accident? Worth enough to send men in the middle of a Christmas blizzard to steal a document? Maybe. Or maybe it wasn't about the land itself. Maybe the land was over something. He was still thinking about it when he heard Rusty get up from his blanket in the living room and walk down the hall and stop outside the spare room door. The old dog pushed the door open with his nose. Logan had left it unlatched. Came inside, walked in a small circle beside the bed, and lay down on the floor next to him. Logan reached down in the dark and put his hand on the dog's side. After a while, he slept. Reyes called back in 36 hours, not 48. That was unusual. It meant she'd found something fast, which meant the layers hadn't been as deep as they should have been, which meant either whoever built the structure was arrogant or they'd built it in a hurry. Valley Resource Partners, she said, without preamble. Colorado LLC, registered 18 months ago. Sole managing member is a holding company called Meridian Land Trust, registered in Delaware. Meridian connects to a private equity group called Halcyon Asset Management, based in Denver. She paused. Halcyon is real. It's not a shell. It's a legitimate private equity firm with about $800 million in assets under management. Legitimate, Logan said. On paper. The principals have clean records, clean financials, clean everything. But Halcyon has a pattern. They identify distressed or undervalued rural properties, acquire them through intermediaries, and then resell to energy development companies. Specifically, a gas and mineral extraction company called Tethys Energy Group. Another pause, longer this time. Tethys has exploration licenses in 6 Colorado counties. Garfield County is not currently on that list, but there was a preliminary geological survey filed with the state 18 months ago, same month Valley Resource Partners was incorporated, flagging a formation under the Red Hollow Valley as a possible high-yield natural gas deposit. Logan was standing at the side window of the spare room, looking out at the north field. One of the trail cameras he'd mounted on the fence post the day before was visible as a small dark shape against the white snow. Under the ranch, he said. Under most of the valley, if the survey's right. But the Brooks property is directly over the deepest part of the formation. Reyes's voice was measured and careful in the way it got when she was about to say something she didn't like saying. Logan, if that survey is accurate, we're talking about a deposit worth potentially hundreds of millions in extraction rights. The land itself is incidental. They need the mineral rights, and the mineral rights go with the deed. The window was cold against his arm. What about Purvis, he said. Dale Purvis. Sheriff, 8 years. Before that, deputy for 12. Before that? She clicked something. He worked private security for Halcyon Asset Management for 3 years. Left in good standing, on his own, went back to law enforcement. A beat. He bought a second property in Aspen 2 years ago. Cash purchase. A deputy's salary doesn't touch that. The shape of it was complete now. Logan could see all of it. Halcyon had identified the formation. They'd started acquiring land through Valley Resource Partners. The Brooks Ranch was the anchor. They couldn't proceed without it. Elena had refused to sell. Marcus had died. Elena had still refused to sell. Derek had been leveraged somehow. His debts, probably, his particular combination of need and resentment, to apply family pressure. When that hadn't worked fast enough, they'd escalated, and the county sheriff was on their payroll. How bad is this? He asked, because he wanted to hear her say it. The 3 men arrested Christmas night, Reyes said. 2 of them were released this morning. Charges dropped. I checked the county records. Purvis filed a report that significantly underplayed the incident. Logan, the report says the men were found trespassing and released on recognizance pending a hearing that's been scheduled for 6 weeks from now. There's no mention of the assault on Ms. Brooks. No mention of the attempted document theft. Logan stood very still. The 3rd man, the one you found inside the house, he's still in holding, but his attorney showed up this morning. Private attorney, Denver firm. She paused. Same firm that Halcyon Asset Management uses for contract work. They're going to walk him too, Logan said, probably within 48 hours. He thought for a moment. Reyes, I need this packaged. Everything. The corporate chain, the survey, Purvis's employment history, the Aspen property, whatever you can document. For who? FBI field office in Denver, Colorado. AG's office and a private attorney named... He turned toward the hallway. What's your attorney's name? He called. Elena's voice came from the kitchen. Sandra Vick, Pueblo. Sandra Vick in Pueblo, Logan said into the phone. This is going to get loud, Reyes said. When these people realize their local arrangement isn't going to hold the lid down, they're going to move faster. I know. How much time do you need? I don't know, he said honestly. A few days, maybe less. Logan? Her voice changed, not unprofessional, just human. Are you okay out there? This isn't... You went on that bus for a reason. He watched the trail camera on the fence post. The red indicator light was blinking, which meant it was live and uploading. I'm okay, he said, which was more true than it had been in a while, and he wasn't entirely sure what to do with that. He told Elena everything at the kitchen table, over coffee, directly. He didn't soften it, and he didn't deliver it in stages. She deserved the complete picture at once. She listened without interrupting. Her hands were around her mug, and she didn't look away from him, and when he finished, she was quiet for close to a minute. The survey, she said finally. The geological survey. Marcus never knew about it? I don't know. It's possible he found out. She set the mug down. He was on the county land use committee, volunteer position. He'd been on it for years. She said it slowly, assembling something. He mentioned something about 3 months before he died. He said he'd seen something in a state filing that didn't make sense to him. I didn't pay attention. I thought it was committee business. He talked about it sometimes, and I half listened. Her voice didn't break. It went somewhere quieter. He said he was going to make some calls about it. Logan didn't say what they were both thinking. My attorney, Elena said. Sandra, I need to call her today. Yes. And the FBI? Yes. Reyes is packaging the documentation. Sandra needs to receive it and file a formal complaint so there's a record that can't be buried locally. Elena nodded, precise, controlled. Then she said, Derek. He's part of this. Whether he knew the full scope, the survey, Marcus, or just knew he was being used to pressure you and took the deal because he needed the money, I can't tell you yet. But he's connected. She was quiet again for a moment. We grew up in this house, she said. Not to Logan exactly. More to the room, to the walls, to whoever they'd been before all of this. He used to carry me to the barn when we were kids because I was afraid of the dark part of the path. She picked up her mug. People change, I guess. Some do, Logan said. Not always into something you'd recognize. She looked at him. What do we do until Sandra can act? Until the FBI processes anything? We're careful. We stay visible enough that any move against you has witnesses, but not so visible that you're exposed. He leaned forward slightly. I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly, not politely. Okay. Is there anywhere you could go? Someone you trust, off this property for a few days? Her answer was in her face before she said it. This is my property, my parents' property. Marcus is buried on the back quarter next to the big cottonwood. She held his gaze. I'm not leaving. He'd expected that. Probably would have thought less of her if it had gone the other way. All right, he said. Then we need to talk about the barn. Prasad. He spent the next 6 hours turning the ranch into something better than what it had been Christmas night. This wasn't instinct. It was methodology, the kind he'd been trained in for 8 years before he'd been moved to the kind of work that nobody discussed at dinner. He was running a site security assessment on a 300-acre rural property with 1 resident, 2 dogs, and no backup within 40 minutes of the location. He designated primary and secondary positions in the house. He cleared the barn of anything that could be used against them and identified it as an alternative shelter point with its own exit. He drove the perimeter road twice more, this time paying attention to which sections gave approaching vehicles the longest unobserved window, and those sections were the ones he put the cameras on. He rigged the noise wire along the north ditch. Elena helped, driving slowly along the fence line while he walked it, handing him materials through the truck window. She didn't offer commentary on the work. She just did what was useful. At one point she said, You've done this before. Set up a location like this. Yes? How many times? Enough that it doesn't feel strange anymore. He attached the last length of wire to a fence post. That's either reassuring or not, depending on how you look at it. She considered it. I'll take reassuring. By the time they came back inside, it was late afternoon and the light was going flat and gray over the snow. Logan checked the camera feeds on Elena's laptop, all 4 live, uploading clean, covering the angles he needed. He walked the house once more. Back door, deadbolted. Front door, a second fastening he'd added that morning. Side window, properly secured. Then his phone buzzed. A text from Reyes. Package sent to Vic and federal contacts. Also, check your north camera. Timestamp 1432. He pulled up the camera feed on the laptop and scrolled back to 2:32 in the afternoon. At 2:32, a black SUV had driven slowly past the north fence line, past the property, and continued without stopping. It had done this once. The plates were visible. Logan ran them through a contact in the DM5 he'd maintained for 3 years and probably shouldn't still have. The SUV was registered to a private security firm called Castleton Group, based in Denver. He looked the firm up. 3 seconds of searching. Castleton Group's listed clients included Halcyon Asset Management. He looked at the timestamp again. 2:32 p.m. While he and Elena had been at the fence line in plain view, running the noise wire. They'd been seen, which meant whoever was watching now knew that the property wasn't just a woman alone anymore. Reyes had said it. When they realized their local arrangement wasn't going to hold the lid, they'd move faster. He set the laptop down and looked at Elena. "We need to call Sandra tonight," he said. "Not tomorrow. Tonight." She read his face. "What happened?" "We're being watched. Professional level, not Derek's hired hands." He kept his voice flat and steady because that was what the moment needed. "They know I'm here, and they know we're preparing." Elena looked at the laptop screen, at the black SUV frozen on the camera frame. "So they're going to come before we're ready," she said. "They're going to try," Logan said. Outside, in the long winter dark that was already settling over the valley, the trail camera on the north fence post blinked its small red light steadily into the cold, watching the empty road, watching the snow, watching the last gray edge of light disappear behind the mountains. Sandra Vick answered on the 3rd ring. She was in her car, from the sound of it, and when Elena said her name and started talking, the attorney's voice shifted from tired end of day into something sharper within the first 30 seconds. "Tell me everything," Sandra said. "Don't leave anything out. I'm pulling over." Logan sat at the kitchen table and listened to Elena talk, and he thought about the black SUV and the men who drove it and the hundreds of millions of dollars underneath 300 acres of Colorado mountain land, and he thought about how that kind of money didn't lose gracefully, and he thought about the fact that federal documentation and a private attorney in Pueblo were exactly the right moves, but they were also moves that took days and sometimes weeks to produce any protection. And they had hours, maybe less. Rusty had come to sit beside Elena's chair. The old dog pressed his weight against her leg and didn't move, and Elena reached down without interrupting what she was saying to Sandra and put her hand on the dog's head and kept talking. Logan watched the camera feeds. At 11:14 p.m., all 4 cameras registered motion simultaneously, not from one direction, from 3. 3 directions meant coordination. Coordination meant radios. Radios meant someone giving orders from somewhere that wasn't in Logan's camera coverage. He had about 90 seconds before they reached the house. "Elena." He was already moving toward the bedroom. "Off the phone, now." She heard his voice and told Sandra to hold and looked at the laptop screen. 4 cameras, 3 showing movement, dark shapes coming through the north field, 2 more coming up the driveway without headlights, and a 3rd approach vector along the tree line on the east side that he'd worried about and hadn't been able to cover well enough. "How many?" she said. Not a question, just her brain processing. "Minimum 5. Could be 8. He came back from the bedroom with the Mossberg and handed it to her. "Kitchen, away from the windows, the corner between the refrigerator and the back wall. You have a sight line to both the back door and the hallway from there." "Logan?" "Sandra still on the line?" "Yes." "Tell her to call 911 and give this address. Tell her to stay on with dispatch and not hang up. He moved to the front window. Go. He heard Elena talking, heard the shift in Sandra's voice through the phone, even from across the room. Good. A lawyer on the line with an active 911 call created a record that even a compromised sheriff would have difficulty managing. Duke was at the front door, rigid, doing what Duke did, processing everything through his nose while Logan processed it through the camera feeds and his own set of worn instincts that never fully powered down. Logan put his hand on the door handle and thought through what he had. No firearm, Kabar on his belt, a Belgian Malinois who was 9 years old but moved like 6. A noise wire on the north ditch that would buy him a sound cue and maybe 3 seconds of confusion. 4 cameras that were uploading live footage to a cloud server that Reyes was currently monitoring from Denver. That last part was actually the most important thing. Whatever happened in the next 20 minutes was being recorded to a server that nobody in this county could touch. He opened the front door and went out. He heard the noise wire before he saw anyone. A sharp clatter of metal from the north field, a pause, and then a male voice saying something low and sharp that the wind ate. Someone had tripped it, and they weren't happy about it, which meant they didn't know it was there, which meant their intelligence on the property had limits. That was something. He came off the porch and went left into the dark, using the same route he'd used Christmas night, the porch shadow and then the woodpile. Duke was with him, close, moving on his own recognition of the situation without being directed. 2 men coming up the driveway had stopped when the noise wire went off in the north field. They were standing still, which was a mistake. Stillness in the open was worse than movement because movement was adaptive. He could see them against the snow, backlit faintly by the ambient light from town 3 miles away. One was tall, one was shorter, with a wider stance. Both had the posture of men who'd done this before. Not Castleton private security consultants who drove SUVs to meetings, hired operational people. The tall one had a radio to his ear. Logan circled wide to come at the driveway from the west side, staying in the deeper shadow along the fence. He was managing a problem that had no clean solution. 2 at the driveway, at least 2 or 3 in the north field, at least 1 on the east tree line. If he engaged the driveway pair, the north field group would hear it and move faster. If he stayed passive and let them tighten the perimeter, they'd have the house surrounded inside of 3 minutes. He needed to change the problem. He unclipped his phone and sent 1 text to Reyes. Live. Document everything. Then he picked up a rock from the frozen ground along the fence, fist-sized, solid, and threw it as hard as he could at the equipment shed. It hit the metal siding with a sound like a gunshot. Both men at the driveway spun toward it. The tall one said something into the radio. Logan covered the distance between the fence and the near man in 4 long strides, and hit him from behind with a technique that was neither elegant nor complicated. A forearm across the throat from behind, his full weight dropping onto the man's back, taking him to the ground fast and hard. The man's radio skittered across the frozen gravel. The shorter one turned and Logan was already up and moving, and the shorter man did something unexpected. He dropped into a fighting stance, real training behind it, and threw a combination that Logan barely got his arm up to absorb. It hurt. The guy was fast. Duke ended the problem. He came in from the left and took the man by the forearm. Controlled, trained bite, hold not damage. And the man went down yelling and stopped fighting immediately, because fighting a dog that has your forearm is a losing proposition, and most people figure that out fast. Logan retrieved the radio from the gravel. He pressed the transmit button and said, clearly and calmly, 2 down at the driveway. I have your radio frequency and your approach routes are on camera. The footage is live to an off-site server. You want to call this off? Now would be the time. Static. Then a voice he didn't recognize. Who is this? Doesn't matter. What matters is that you're on record and you don't have a local fix for that problem. Think about it. He released the transmit button. Duke held the shorter man down with calm professional authority. 30 seconds of silence from the radio. Then from the north field, the noise wire went off again. Harder this time, like someone running through it rather than tripping over it. And he heard boots in the snow coming fast. They weren't calling it off. The next 8 minutes were the kind of thing that Logan never talked about afterward. Not because he was modest, but because there was no clean narrative version of close quarters work in the dark. It wasn't tactical and precise the way it looked in movies. It was loud and cold, and there were moments where he made the wrong call and corrected, and moments where Duke was the only reason he didn't take a blow he couldn't recover from. And at some point he was on the ground with frozen gravel in his face and had to remind himself how to get back up. And he did get back up. When it was over, and over was a relative term, more like a pause, like the energy going out of something, there were 4 men on the ground outside the house, in various states of incapacitation, and one had run. And Logan was standing in the north field with blood on the side of his head from something he couldn't fully account for, and both hands were shaking slightly, which was adrenaline, and his left side had taken something that was going to be significantly worse by morning. Duke came back from the tree line with the look he had when he'd done his job. "Good boy," Logan said, because Duke deserved to hear it. He turned back toward the house. The front door was open. He'd left it closed. He moved to the porch in 4 fast steps and through the door and into the living room and stopped. There were 2 people in the kitchen. One was Elena, still in the corner he'd put her in, the Mossberg leveled from her lap, held steady with both hands. Her face was completely controlled. Not calm exactly, controlled, which is a different thing. It means you're feeling something and you've put a lid on it. The other person was Derek. He'd come in through the back somehow. He'd gotten through the deadbolt, which meant he had a key. Of course he had a key. He'd grown up in this house. He probably had a copy no one had thought to account for. He was standing in the kitchen with his hands partially raised, caught between his sister's shotgun and Logan's arrival. He was not one of the Castleton contractors. He was just a man in a work jacket with his hands in front of him and his face doing something complicated and ugly that had guilt all through it. "Elena," he said, I didn't know they were going to send people like this. I thought it was just going to be legal pressure, I thought." "Stop talking," she said. "I need you to understand." "Derek." Her voice was flat and final as a door closing. "I need you to sit down and not say another word until law enforcement arrives, which is going to be very soon. Can you do that?" He sat down. He put his face in his hands. Logan assessed the rest of the house in 30 seconds, clear, and came back to the kitchen doorway and leaned against the frame. His left side was insisting on his attention, and he declined to give it. He looked at Derek in the chair. Derek was crying, which Logan found neither moving nor particularly useful. The sound of sirens came through the walls, distant, getting closer. Not Purvis. These were higher pitched, the oscillating wail of state patrol rather than the flat horn of a county unit. Sandra had apparently done some work on that 911 call. The state patrol arrived first, 4 units. Then, 20 minutes later, 2 vehicles with federal plates that had driven in from Grand Junction, which meant someone had been moving on this faster than Logan had expected. He found out later that Reyes had not limited herself to sending documentation. She'd also placed 2 phone calls to people in the Denver FBI field office who owed her professional courtesies, and those calls had happened before 9 p.m., well before the Castleton contractors arrived at the ranch. Reyes had seen the pattern in what Logan had told her, and had moved without being asked. He made a note to tell her that he owed her something significant, not a favor but an actual debt, and that he intended to pay it. The next 3 hours were a specific kind of exhausting that had nothing to do with physical condition. Statements. Questions asked twice by different people in different rooms. Logan sat at the kitchen table and answered everything directly and without qualification, and when they asked him about his background, he told them, and watched the shift in the room that happened when you told a federal agent you'd spent 7 years in a special operations unit that technically didn't appear in standard military records. The agent's name was Hargrove, 40-something, gray at the temples, the kind of face that had heard everything and reacted to nothing. "You did all of this," Hargrove said, and it wasn't quite a question. "Duke helped," Logan said. Hargrove looked at the dog. Duke looked back. "The 4 individuals outside," Hargrove said. 2 have prior records. 1 is ex-military, private contractor background. 1 we're running now." He set down his pen. "You're aware that acting as an unlicensed security operative in the course of—" "I was a guest in the house," Logan said. "I defended myself and the property owner from a coordinated nighttime assault by multiple armed individuals." He held Hargrove's gaze. "If you'd like to debate the legal framing, I'd suggest we do it after you've looked at what Gabriela Reyes sent your office this afternoon." Hargrove looked at him for a moment. Reyes, he said, former DIA. She runs a firm in Denver. She sent documentation on Valley Resource Partners, Halcyon Asset Management, Tethys Energy Group, and the employment and financial history of Sheriff Dale Purvis. Logan kept his voice level. The footage from tonight is time-stamped and on a server she controls. All 4 cameras. Entire incident. Hargrove closed his notebook. I'm going to step out for a few minutes, he said, which Logan understood meant he was going to make a phone call about things he'd already received and hadn't mentioned yet. Take your time, Logan said. Purvis arrived at 45 minutes past midnight. He came in the front door in his uniform and was 2 steps into the living room before he saw the federal agents and stopped. Logan was standing near the hallway entrance and watched the sheriff's face go through several things in rapid sequence. Surprise, recalculation, and then something that settled into a particular kind of stillness that Logan recognized as a man deciding how to manage a situation that had already managed him. Purvis looked at Logan. Mercer, he said. Sheriff? Quite a night. Yeah. Hargrove came out of the kitchen. He and Purvis looked at each other, and the look lasted about 2 seconds longer than a professional greeting should have. Dale, Hargrove said. Tom. Purvis's voice was careful. They knew each other. You moved fast. We had documentation that was time-sensitive. Hargrove put his hands in his jacket pockets. I think you should come with me into the kitchen. Purvis didn't move immediately. He looked around the room, at Logan, at the state patrol officer by the front door, at Elena, who had come into the living room and was watching him from her chair with an expression that was perfectly neutral and hit harder because of it. Dale, Elena said quietly. You knew Marcus. Purvis looked at her. He came to you, she said, about the state survey filing, didn't he? The kitchen was very quiet. I don't know what you're talking about, Purvis said. He would have gone to you, Elena said. He trusted you. You went to the same high school. He would have brought it to the sheriff first before he went anywhere else with it. Her voice stayed even throughout this, and it cost her something. Logan could see that, but she spent it deliberately. Did you tell them he was going to make calls? Did you make a call yourself? Elena, I'm not asking you to confess to me, she said. I'm asking because I've spent 2 years thinking my husband drove off a straight road on a clear afternoon, and I spent all that time thinking it was just something that happened, just something random and terrible that happens to people. And I need to know if it was that or if it was something else. Her hands were in her lap, still. I need to know which one it was. Purvis was quiet for a long time, long enough that Logan started to think he wouldn't answer. Then something in the sheriff's face changed. Not dramatically, not the way it happened in movies, just a kind of settling, a weight going somewhere it had been held back from for a while. He didn't say anything. He just looked at Elena, and in the looking was the answer she'd asked for, and she received it without sound. Hargrove touched Purvis on the arm and said, Come on, Dale. And they went into the kitchen. Logan moved to Elena's side. He didn't say anything. There was nothing to say that the moment needed. He just stood there while she processed what she'd just been handed, and after a minute she reached up and put her hand on his arm. Just briefly, just enough to acknowledge that he was there, and then she took it back and straightened in the chair. Okay, she said, mostly to herself. Okay. Derek broke at 2 a.m. He'd been sitting in the spare room with the state patrol officer while Hargrove's team worked through the rest of the property. Logan heard it from the kitchen, not the specifics, but the sound of it, the shift from controlled denial into the ragged, disorganized relief of someone who'd been carrying something they couldn't carry anymore and finally put it down. Hargrove emerged 20 minutes later with the expression of a man who had just heard something significant. He came to Logan first, which told Logan something about how the room had reorganized itself over the course of the night. Her brother, Hargrove said, low. He was recruited by a Halcyon intermediary 8 months ago. They had his gambling debts, substantial, and they offered to clear them in exchange for his cooperation. His role was to apply pressure on his sister to sell. He paused. He says he knew about the plan to take the deed. He says he didn't know about Marcus. Do you believe him? Hargrove considered the question seriously. I think he knew something was wrong with that accident, and he chose not to look at it directly. Which isn't the same as not knowing, but it's not the same as knowing either. He looked toward the spare room door. The larger piece is his wife. Logan waited. His wife, Carol, has been the Halcyon intermediary's direct contact for 14 months, Hargrove said. She approached Derek with the debt arrangement, which he thought was her trying to help him. She was already working for them before that. We think she was the one who flagged Marcus's connection to the state survey filing. A pause. And she arranged the insurance policy on Marcus through a subsidiary connection 6 weeks before his death. We're pulling the accident reconstruction. The kitchen was very quiet. The car, Logan said. We think it was mechanical interference, Hargrove said. We'll know more when we pull the original report and reconstruction. Logan looked through the kitchen doorway toward the living room where Elena had been for the last hour, talking quietly with one of the state patrol officers who'd been thoughtful enough to bring coffee from somewhere. She'd spent 2 years blaming herself for surviving, for not being in the car that day, for having argued with Marcus that morning about something small and stupid. She told Logan that, in the early hours before everything started, the way people told certain things when the hour was late and the walls were down. She'd spent 2 years with the weight of survival sitting on her chest. Now that weight had a different shape, not lighter. Something like grief almost never got lighter. It just changed what it was made of. But different. The guilt part, at least, had somewhere to go. She needs to hear this from you, Logan said. Not from me. I know. Hargrove picked up his jacket. I'll give her another few minutes. Logan nodded. He walked to the kitchen window and looked out at the property. The trail cameras blinking their red lights in the dark. The evidence markers the team had placed where the contractors had gone down. The blue and red light bars from the state patrol units painting the snow in slow rotations. His left side was going to be a serious problem by morning. He could feel the swelling already, the specific deep ache of something bruised badly enough to matter. He'd had worse. He'd also had the sense, at various points in his life, not to ignore this kind of thing, and he was going to ignore it anyway because the night wasn't finished. His phone buzzed. Reyes. 4 contractors in custody. Halcyon principals placed under federal hold pending investigation. Tethys Energy connection being pulled. You're going to be in a lot of reports. He typed back. I know, thank you. Her response was immediate. Don't thank me. Go to a hospital. He put the phone away. From the living room came a silence that had changed quality. The way silence changed when something that had been unsaid finally got said. He heard Elena's voice, low and unsteady in a way it hadn't been all night, the composure finally finding its edges, and then nothing for a while. Logan stayed in the kitchen and let her have it. Duke came and leaned against his leg with the full weight of a dog who'd been working all night and was prepared to keep working but registered a preference for it to be over soon. Logan reached down and scratched behind the dog's ear, the good one, the one that still sat right. Outside, the first gray suggestion of dawn was starting at the edge of the mountains. It was December 28th. Logan had been in Red Hollow for 4 days. He'd come off a bus that broke down in a blizzard, and he'd planned to keep walking north toward nothing in particular, and instead he was standing in a farmhouse kitchen in Colorado, with a bruised ribcage, and federal agents in his living room, and a woman in the next room who was learning the true shape of the worst thing that had ever happened to her. He thought about the bus. He thought about the north. He didn't think about it for very long. Hargrove came back into the kitchen and poured himself the last of the coffee and looked at Logan over the rim of the cup. You're going to need to be available, the agent said. Statements, possibly testimony. This is going to take months to fully prosecute. I'll be available, Logan said. Hargrove studied him. You're not going anywhere. It wasn't a question. Logan had noticed that Hargrove asked fewer questions than most people in his position. He was good at recognizing when a fact had already been established. No, Logan said. I'm not going anywhere. From the living room he heard Elena's voice again, steadier now, asking Hargrove's colleague something specific about the legal timeline, already thinking forward, already building the shape of what came next out of whatever the last few hours had left her with. Logan listened to her voice and thought about how a person sounded when they were deciding, in real time, to survive something. Rusty appeared in the kitchen doorway, moving slowly, favoring his right side where Derek's boot had found him on Christmas Eve. The old dog looked at Logan with the patient, undramatic assessment of an animal that had been around long enough to understand that things happened and then more things happened after. Logan lowered himself carefully to one knee, favoring his left side, and ran his hands gently down Rusty's ribs the way he had in the snow 4 nights ago. "Still here," he said quietly. The old dog pushed his head against Logan's palm. Outside the window, the mountains were coming back out of the dark, ridge by ridge, the sky going from black to a deep cold blue at the horizon, and the snow on the fields catching the first faint light and giving it back in a way that made everything look, briefly, like the world had been remade in the night. It hadn't been. The world was the same world it had always been, but certain things in it had changed positions, and sometimes that was enough. The hospital in Grand Junction was 45 minutes away, and Logan refused to go until the last federal vehicle had left the property. Hargrove didn't push it. He was a practical man, and he could see that pushing it would accomplish nothing, so he got Logan's contact information, shook his hand, and told him that the first round of interviews would be scheduled within the week. Then he got in his car and drove away, and the state patrol units followed, and eventually the only vehicles left were Elena's F-250 and a county evidence van that would be gone by noon. Elena drove him to the hospital. He didn't argue about that either. She drove the way she did most things, efficiently, without excess motion, adaptive to conditions. The roads were clear by now. The blizzard felt like something that had happened in another week. Logan sat in the passenger seat with his jacket unzipped and his left hand braced against the door and watched the mountains come fully into the morning and didn't say much. "You should have gone hours ago," she said. "I know. Stubborn. Also know that." She glanced at him sideways. "Is it ribs?" "Probably 2, maybe 3. Nothing punctured. I'd know by now." "How would you know?" "Different kind of pain." He shifted slightly and regretted it. "I've had both." She was quiet for a moment. "That's not a reassuring thing to say." "No, I guess not." The highway opened up ahead of them, empty and straight in the early morning. Duke was in the back seat, chin on the center console between them, watching the road with the same focused patience he gave everything. "You don't have to stay," Elena said. "After this, the statements, the interviews, they can be done remotely." Hargrove said so. "You could go back to whatever you were going toward." Logan looked at the road. "I wasn't going toward anything," he said. She didn't answer immediately. She let it sit, the way she did with things that needed room. "I know," she said finally. "I just didn't want you to feel like you couldn't leave." "I know you didn't." He turned to look at her profile. The jaw still slightly swollen on one side. 3 days past the punch now, and fading to yellow at the edges. The tiredness in her face that was the specific tiredness of someone who hadn't slept, and had spent those unsleeping hours rearranging the architecture of everything they understood about their own life. "I don't feel like I can't leave," he said. "I feel like I don't want to. There's a difference." She kept her eyes on the road, but something in her shoulders changed slightly. "Yeah," she said. "There is. 2 broken ribs, 1 fractured, a bruised kidney that the ER doctor described as significant, in a tone that meant it was more than significant. 3 lacerations, 2 on his forearms, 1 along his left temple that needed 4 stitches, and that he genuinely had no memory of receiving. The doctor was a woman in her 50s who had the specific manner of someone who had stitched up enough people to have stopped being surprised by the circumstances. She asked Logan once how this had happened, and he gave her the version that was true, if compressed. Altercation, multiple assailants, rural Colorado. And she looked at him over her glasses, and then looked at Elena in the chair by the window, and then went back to what she was doing without further comment. "You're going to be uncomfortable for about 6 weeks," she said. "No heavy lifting, no anything that strains the thoracic cavity." "Define heavy lifting," Logan said. "More than 15 pounds. "That's not going to work for me." She looked at him again. "Then at least try to be aware of what you're doing to yourself. Your body is not a renewable resource." Elena made a sound from the chair that wasn't quite a laugh. They were back at the ranch by 10 in the morning. Logan slept for 4 hours on the spare room bed without taking his boots off, which he normally would never do, and when he woke up, Rusty was on the floor beside him again, and the house smelled like food, which meant Elena had been cooking, which meant she'd been awake. He found her in the kitchen making soup from what appeared to be everything in the refrigerator simultaneously. It was the kind of cooking that happened when someone needed to do something with their hands. "You should have slept," he said. "I did. 2 hours." She stirred something without looking up. Sandra called. "The preliminary hearing on the deed claim has been dismissed. Derek's petition is gone." "Good. Halcyon's assets in Colorado are frozen pending the federal investigation." She put the lid on the pot. Tethys Energy issued a statement this morning distancing themselves from the situation. Sandra says that's them getting ahead of the story, which means they already have lawyers working on how to avoid being named directly. Will it work? Sandra says probably not, given the paper trail. She finally looked up. Purvis was taken into custody this morning, formally, not just held for questioning. Logan leaned against the doorframe. "How do you feel about that?" The question landed in the room and she took her time with it, which he'd learned was what she did with things she wanted to answer honestly. "I feel like I'm angry at him," she said. "And I also feel like I knew him for 30 years, and that doesn't just go away because he turned out to be the wrong thing." She picked up a dish towel, set it down. "Both of those things are true at the same time." "Yeah," Logan said. "They are." The federal investigation moved the way federal investigations did, methodically, unhurriedly, with the grinding thoroughness of an institutional process that had no deadline and answered to its own internal logic. Logan gave 3 formal interviews over the next 2 weeks, 1 in person in Grand Junction and 2 by video. He gave his statements in the same way he'd written patrol reports in the military, precise, chronological, without embellishment or editorial. Hargrove called him after the 3rd interview. "You testified in court before?" he asked. "Twice. Military tribunals." "It shows." A pause. "We're building a RICO case. It's going to be extensive. The Halcyon principals are lawyered up and quiet, but the contractors are talking and the paper trail Ray has built is solid." Another pause. "The accident reconstruction on Marcus Brooks came back." Logan was standing at the north fence line, one of the trail cameras in his hand. He'd been adjusting the angle. He stopped moving. "And?" "Brake line," Hargrove said. "Specific compromise in the hydraulic line that would have failed progressively under normal driving conditions. A mechanic would need to know exactly what they were doing." He spoke carefully and evenly. "We've traced a payment from a Halcyon subsidiary account to a garage in Glenwood Springs. The mechanic who worked on Marcus's vehicle 3 days before the accident has a prior relationship with one of the Halcyon intermediaries." A beat. "It was not an accident." Logan looked out at the snowfield. "Elena needs to hear this from you directly," he said. "Not through an attorney. From you." "I know. I'm calling her next." Hargrove paused. "I wanted to tell you first. I thought you should be there when she hears it." Logan understood what Hargrove was saying and what he wasn't saying. "I'll make sure I'm inside," he said. Well, he went into the house and found Elena in the living room with a book she wasn't reading. He sat down across from her and said, "Hargrove is going to call you in the next few minutes. I need you to be ready." She looked at him carefully. She'd gotten good at reading his face over the past 2 weeks, better than most people managed in months, and she read it now. "Marcus," she said. "Yes." She closed the book. She put it on the side table with a care that was about something other than the book. She folded her hands in her lap. "Tell me," she said. "Don't make me wait for the phone." He told her. Straight, without softening it. She deserved the real thing, not a managed version of it. She sat very still while he talked. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. Rusty, who had been asleep near the wood stove, lifted his head and looked at her, and then got up slowly and came to put his muzzle on her knee. Her hand went to the dog's head automatically. "He didn't fall asleep at the wheel," she said finally. "He didn't lose focus. He didn't do anything wrong." "No. I thought—" She stopped. Her jaw tightened. "In the beginning, I kept thinking, what was he thinking about? Was he distracted? Was it something I said that morning? We argued before he left. Something stupid about whether we needed to replace the water heater that year or the next year. She stopped again. I spent a year thinking about a water heater argument. Logan didn't say anything. He let her have the shape of it. He was just driving home, she said. He was just on his way home. Yes, Logan said. The phone rang. She looked at it for a moment and then answered it, and Hargrove's voice came through measured and clear and said all the things he was required to say. She listened. She said yes, and I understand, and thank you at the right intervals. And when she hung up, she looked at the fireplace. Not at Logan, at the fire. And her face did several things in succession that he'd learned not to look away from, because the people who mattered were the ones who didn't look away. After a while, she said, I need to go outside. He held the door for her. She went to the back quarter of the property alone. He watched her go from the porch and then didn't watch. He gave her the time and the privacy that belonged to what she was doing. Duke sat beside him on the porch, and they both looked at the mountains and the particular blue of the January sky over the valley. She was gone for 40 minutes. When she came back, her face was changed. Not lighter, because that word was wrong, but like something had been realigned. The kind of change that happened when you finally understood the true shape of a thing you'd been carrying. I need to do something with this place, she said, coming up the porch ramp. With what this is, after everything. Logan looked at her. What do you mean? I mean, I've been trying to just hold it. Just keep it what it was. She stopped at the top of the ramp. But Marcus and I always talked about doing something more. He had an idea once about using the back pasture for a veterans retreat. Some of his army buddies were struggling, and he'd read about programs that used agricultural work and open land as therapy, and he thought we had exactly the right kind of land for it. She looked at the pasture, the barn, the long expanse of snow and fence line. I put it aside after he died. I put everything aside. Logan was quiet. I'm done putting it aside, she said. The legal process took 8 months to produce its primary results, and a year and a half to finish completely. The Halcyon principals, 3 of them partners in the firm, were indicted on federal charges that included conspiracy, fraud, and in the case of the managing partner, a charge connected to the arrangement that had ended Marcus Brooks's life. Carol Brooks, Derek's wife, was indicted separately on charges that included conspiracy in connection with that same arrangement and with the fraud campaign against Elena. She took a plea deal in month 6 that required full cooperation and produced testimony that helped close the remaining gaps in the federal case. Derek did not take a plea deal. He hired an attorney and sat through the process, and in month 9 was convicted on 2 counts of fraud and 1 count of criminal conspiracy. He was sentenced to 4 years, of which he would likely serve 2. Logan heard this from Sandra Vick and received it without comment. Elena received it the same way. Not with satisfaction, not with grief, just with the steady acknowledgement of someone who had accepted that the people who hurt you were sometimes people you'd grown up with, and that knowing them didn't make what they'd done less real. She visited Derek once, before his sentencing. Logan drove her to the county facility and waited in the truck. She was inside for 40 minutes. When she came out, she looked tired and complete in some way she hadn't looked before. Did you say what you needed to? He asked. Yes? Did it help? She thought about it. Not the way I thought it would, but yeah. He started the truck. Purvis pled guilty to corruption charges in month 4. He gave full cooperation in exchange for a reduced sentence and lost his job, his pension, and the Aspen property which was seized. Logan felt nothing specific about this and didn't examine what that meant. The Castleton contractors were split between those who cooperated and those who didn't. 2 went to prison. 2 took plea deals and received probation. The one who had run that night in the North Field was located in Utah in month 3 and extradited. He cooperated. Tethys Energy Group survived, primarily because their legal team moved fast enough to establish that the Halcyon arrangement had been conducted without Tethys's explicit authorization, a claim that was technically arguable and expensively argued. They did not ultimately acquire exploration rights in Garfield County. The geological survey became a matter of public record. 2 other energy companies sent inquiry letters to Elena within 60 days of that record becoming public. Sandra answered both letters with responses that Logan described as surgical and that Elena described as a no that they will remember. The nonprofit application was Sandra's idea, practically speaking, though the concept had always been Elena's. Harbor Ridge Haven. Elena had the name within a week of the conversation on the porch, and Logan didn't question it because it was the right name and you knew the right name when you heard it. They spent 3 months on the nonprofit documentation, the land use permits, the Colorado regulatory requirements. Logan handled the construction side, the renovation of the barn into a functional gathering space, the conversion of the summer kitchen into something actually usable, the addition of an accessible path system that connected every structure on the property. He wasn't a contractor, but he'd built patrol bases in 3 countries, and he knew how to work with his hands and how to supervise people who did it better than he did. He hired local, a carpenter from town, 2 brothers who did concrete and framing, a plumber who came out from Grand Junction and seemed pleased to have straightforward work to do. Elena managed the program side. She contacted veteran service organizations, abuse survivor networks, family services agencies in a 3-county radius. She applied for grants with the methodical persistence of someone who understood that you asked 20 times to get one yes and that the ratio was acceptable. She drove to meetings, alone, in the F250, across winter mountain roads, and presented the program to people who needed to understand it before they could support it. Logan went with her sometimes. He didn't speak at the meetings. He sat in the back and watched her work, watched her translate what the ranch was and what it could be into language that moved people, and he thought about how you couldn't fully see a person until you'd watched them do the thing they were meant to do. "You're good at this," he told her once, driving back from a meeting in Glenwood Springs. "I'm adequate at it," she said. "Sandra is good at it." Sandra isn't the one who made that woman in the back row cry. Elena was quiet. "I wasn't trying to make anyone cry." "I know. That's why it worked." She looked out at the dark road ahead. "Marcus would have been better at it. He was better with people than I am." "Maybe," Logan said. "But he's not here. You are." She didn't answer, but she didn't disagree. Harbor Ridge Haven received its first guests in October, 11 months after a Christmas Eve blizzard had killed a bus on a mountain road and redirected everything. 3 veterans from a referral program in Denver, 1 woman escaping a domestic situation in Rifle with 2 children, and a family from Grand Junction that had lost their housing and had nowhere to go through the winter. Logan had built a small cabin on the east side of the property. Not elaborate, a single room, a wood stove, a narrow porch looking toward the mountains. His tools were in the equipment shed. Duke's bed was beside the wood stove. His duffel was on the floor of the closet, still mostly packed, because he hadn't fully unpacked it yet, which he was aware of and which he was choosing to address at a pace that felt right, rather than one that felt symbolic. The first morning the guests were there, he sat on his cabin porch with coffee and watched the activity around the barn. He could see the 3 veterans helping with morning chores, like one of them had taken to the horses particularly, something that clearly surprised him. He could see the 2 children running a path between the main house and the barn that they'd already worn visible in the thin November frost on the grass. Elena came across the yard toward him around 8, coat on, coffee in hand, navigating the path that connected the main house to the cabin without looking down. She'd memorized its layout within 3 days of it being finished. She stopped at the bottom of his porch steps. "Veteran in cabin 2 had a bad night," she said. "Marcos. He was up at 3. I heard him through the wall." She looked toward the barn. "He seems okay this morning, but I wanted to flag it." "I'll talk to him today," Logan said. "Not push it? Just be around." He looked toward the barn too. "Sometimes that's what works." She nodded. She looked at the property, the barn, the paths, the winter bare trees along the creek, the mountains behind all of it. The morning light was doing something specific to the snow on the upper ridge, turning it the particular orange-pink that only happened at this hour, in this season. "I wasn't sure this was going to work," she said. "It's working. It's working so far, for 11 days. 11 days counts," he said. She looked at him. There were things between them that had been developing for months at the careful, unrushed pace of 2 people who understood that getting something right mattered more than getting it fast. Neither of them had named it yet. Logan figured the naming would come when it came, and that the not naming wasn't the same as not knowing. Reyes called, Elena said. She wants to come see the place. She'll tell you everything that's wrong with the security setup. Good. I want to know. She'll be right about all of it. Also good. She finished her coffee. I'm making breakfast. Come in when you're ready. She turned back toward the house. He watched her go and thought about a broken-down bus in a blizzard and a decision made in 4 seconds in the dark on the side of a mountain road, and how nothing that came after it had been simple or clean or easy, and how none of that mattered because simple and clean and easy had never produced anything worth keeping. He went inside when he was ready. Rusty died on a Tuesday in February, in his spot beside the wood stove, in the early morning before anyone was up. Elena found him when she came out to start the stove. Logan was there within a minute of her calling his name, and they stayed with the old dog in the quiet of the main house for a long time before anything else in the morning needed to happen. They buried him at the edge of the cottonwood grove where Marcus was. Not next to the headstone, but near it, close enough. Elena said she thought Marcus would have wanted that and Logan didn't question it. He built a small marker from fence post timber, not elaborate. She carved the dog's name herself with a woodworking chisel she'd found in the equipment shed, letter by letter, the way she did things she wanted to do slowly. Duke sat at the edge of the grave and watched, and then stood and walked back toward the barn, because Duke was a working dog, and working dogs didn't linger, and there was something right about that too. The grants came through in March. Not all of them. 3 out of 8 applications, which Sandra said was a good ratio for a first-year program, and which felt, to both Elena and Logan, like an insufficient description of what it meant to have enough to keep going. They hired a part-time program coordinator. They added capacity for 6 more guests. They repaired the south fence line and put a garden in the east field that 3 of the residents had started planning on their own, without being asked. Logan sat on his porch in the evenings and watched the light go off the mountains and felt something that wasn't happiness exactly. Happiness was too soft a word, too unearned feeling for what it had taken to get here, but was something adjacent and solid. A sense of use, of application, of being a specific thing in a specific place for reasons that held up when he examined them. He still woke at odd hours, still cataloged sounds, still reached for the sidearm that wasn't there and felt the absence for a second before his brain caught up. There were evenings when the weight of what he'd done in his years of service pressed on him in ways that didn't have clean language. He'd started talking to a therapist in Grand Junction, not because it was comfortable, because it wasn't, but because Elena had said once, matter-of-factly, that she'd been seeing someone and that it was hard and useful in roughly equal measure, and he'd thought about that for 2 weeks before making the call. He went once a month. He usually drove back feeling like he'd been taken apart and imperfectly reassembled, and the imperfect reassembly was, apparently, the point. One evening in April, he was at the kitchen table in the main house, working through a maintenance budget with Elena, and she reached across the table to point at a line item, and her hand landed on top of his for a moment, and neither of them moved. And then she looked up, and he looked up, and they were close enough that the moment required a decision. "Okay?" she said. "Yeah," he said. "Are you sure? Because I'm sure on my end. I've been sure for a while, but you have a tendency to—" "Elena." "What?" "I'm sure." She looked at him for a moment more. Then she laughed, which was a sound he'd been cataloging for months without naming that he was doing it, the particular laugh she had that started short and surprised itself into being longer. They didn't rush what came next. There was no reason to rush anything. The property was quiet in the April evening, the mountains still holding snow on the upper reaches, Duke asleep by the door, the paperwork on the table going nowhere. Some things were worth building slowly. Logan found his duffel in the closet one morning in May and looked at it for a long time. Then he took it off the floor and put it on the shelf above the coat rod, which wasn't unpacking exactly, but was something. He thought about the road north that he'd never taken, the nowhere he'd been heading. He tried to picture what would have happened if the bus had made it through that blizzard, if he'd kept moving, if he'd let the night on the porch resolve itself without him. He couldn't picture it, not because he lacked imagination, but because the alternate version had become genuinely abstract. A road that didn't lead anywhere real. The road he was on now had fences to mend, and a program coordinator who needed supervision, and a water heater that was, Elena maintained, finally actually going to be replaced this summer. It had a cabin with a wood stove and a dog who still worked for a living, and a woman who drove mountain roads in February to ask people for money to help strangers, and who came home from those drives and made soup from everything in the refrigerator and didn't need to be told she was doing something that mattered. It had mornings. That was the simplest way to say it. It had mornings that were different from the ones before, and mornings were where the difference between a life and the absence of one were most visible, in the light on the ridge, and the sound of the house waking up, and the particular quality of coffee that tasted like somewhere you intended to stay. He closed the closet and went to find Elena. He found her in the east field with two of the residents staking out the garden rows in the morning sun, Rusty's marker visible at the edge of the cottonwood grove in the middle distance. She was explaining something about soil drainage, and the conversation was practical and ordinary and entirely specific to this piece of land on this particular morning. She didn't see him right away. He stood at the field's edge and watched her work and felt the thing that didn't have a clean name, that solid, unshowy thing that wasn't happiness but contained it, along with purpose and exhaustion and something that might have been, for the first time in a very long time, the absence of the need to keep moving. Duke sat beside him and looked at the field. "Yeah," Logan said quietly. "I know." The dog leaned against his leg. Elena looked up and saw him and said something to the residents and wheeled toward the field's edge. "Breakfast is on the counter," she said. "I made too much again." "You always make too much." "Because there are always more people than I planned for." She stopped in front of him. The sun was in her hair, and she had soil on her gloves, and she looked like someone who had rebuilt something out of what was left after the worst thing happened, and discovered that the rebuilt version had its own kind of strength. "Are you okay?" "Yeah," he said, and meant it in a way he hadn't meant much of anything in a long time. "I'm okay." She nodded, like she'd checked something off a list she carried internally. "Then come help with the staking," she said. "You're better at the straight lines than I am." He followed her into the field. The mountains held their snow on the upper reaches, and the sky was the specific blue that only happened at this altitude in this season, and somewhere behind the equipment shed, Duke found something worth investigating and went to investigate it, and the morning continued in all its ordinary, unrepeatable particularity. The strongest thing a person can build isn't a wall against the world. It's the willingness to stay when staying costs something, and to choose again and again the people and the place that call something true out of them.